there's time.
Yeah, then let's move ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Joe Morrison, and I'm joined by my colleague Nikki Legrone, and we're going to be giving a quick introduction to the labeling contest that's going to be run in conjunction with this stack sprint that we're super excited about. And so I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because Hamed actually did a great job of introducing this at the sort of formal introduction to the stack sprint. And there's some really interesting presentations after us, so I want to make sure that we give them their full time. But I just want to first start by saying thank you to all of the sponsors who are making this competition possible. I think it's an awesome way for people to get involved in the stack sprint, especially for a broader audience. If, like myself, you're somebody that isn't a software engineer, sometimes it can feel a little hard to keep up, but or feel like you're contributing. But I think creating an open data set that's a stack compliant data set is going to be a great way to do that. And in particular, there's a few sponsors, Planet, Microsoft, Radiant, that I want to shout out for dedicating funds specifically for this. So I'm going to walk through some of the context for what the contest is, why we're doing it, what the timeline is, how to register if you haven't done that yet, what to expect. And then I'm going to hand it over to Nikki, who's the labeling lead at Azavia and our sort of resident expert on the labeling tool that we've built, Groundwork. That's what all contest participants are going to be using in order to generate labels. And so she's going to go through a tutorial, give you some tips and tricks about how to get efficient about that. And then we'll have maybe a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers, depending on time. So first of all, why hold a contest? In particular, we're labeling clouds, and you'll see there's two classes, cloud and background. So really it's just a binary classification. Clouds and remote sensing imagery are a ubiquitous challenge. Oftentimes you're trying to mask them out. In some interesting scenarios, you're actually looking for clouds, different types of cloud patterns. But being able to identify clouds reliably and not confuse high albedo buildings or snow or other ground cover that looks like clouds is a common challenge. There are good algorithms for doing this, but they're not perfect. They can always be improved upon. And because it's such a core use case for so many remote sensing workflows, the organizers thought it would be great to be able to add to the corpus of open data around cloud labeling. I don't actually know of a labeled cloud data set that's in a stacked format on Sentinel-2 imagery. So if you know of a data set like that, do drop that in the chat. Hopefully this will be a good addition, and groups like Azavia, Element 84, I know Arturo is a sponsor. All of us are figuring out ways to deal with cloud masking, and so hopefully some interesting open algorithms might actually come out of this as well. And I already mentioned the other reason for doing this competition is oftentimes these stack sprints are very technically oriented, and it can be difficult to kind of get up and feel like you're contributing to this overall effort, which is really exciting. And this is a really simple way for basically anybody that wants to contribute really valuable data to an open data set. So today is when the competition begins. It will run for a week until next Tuesday, and it will end just before midnight on Tuesday, or excuse me, 11:59. So I guess that's actually it's either noon or midnight. I have to check that.
It's midnight.
It's midnight. Okay, that's what I thought. Midnight on Tuesday. So you have a long time to be adding labels. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so don't feel like you got to rush and get everything done today. You can carve out time throughout the week to add labels. That's what I'm planning to do. And hopefully as a community, we can create a really impressive data set by the end. There's some pretty exciting prizes. First place is $2,000. And you get to task a SkySat image, and then that will get openly licensed, which I think is really cool. It's really neat that you can point a satellite pretty much anywhere at Earth. And so thank you, Planet, for generously offering that. There's a bunch of other great prizes, and really we want to encourage people to contribute. So even people that provide just a score of 10, the score I'll explain in a minute, but you can qualify for some prizes. This is obviously as supplies last. If we wind up with 10,000 contributors, there's probably not 10,000 t-shirts. So really it's not about the prizes, it's more about contributing data, but we're going to try to be as generous as we possibly can. And we're really grateful for people taking out time to work on this. Let me just, I see, well, we'll get to questions at the end. I'm not able to actually see them at the moment. There's a pretty clever algorithm that will be used to score the contributions that people make. And so rather than just say number of tasks submitted, so we take these large Sentinel-2 images, we cut them up into a grid of, I think, 512 by 512 pixel squares. You label the square exhaustively, and you'll see all this in a minute when Nikki takes over, and then submit it. If we just said number of tasks submitted, then there would be kind of a gross incentive to look for the simplest task and submit as many as you can, and leave other people holding the bag, labeling really complicated tasks. And so, this is probably an imperfect workaround to that, but basically we're trying to weight tasks such that if you get a really complicated task and there's lots of small clouds and you're spending a lot of time on it, you'll actually get rewarded for having submitted a more complicated task. And so we're really looking for people to be thorough and accurate and kind of take their time, not just rip through as many tasks as they can in order to get the top prize, that sort of thing. And so, I won't promise that this is going to be the final algorithm. If we notice someone's figured out a way to kind of hack this, or if we qualitatively check people's work and see that it's kind of junk data that's being submitted, obviously that's going to disqualify you. But we also might think about revising the algorithm to make it as equitable as possible. But if all you take from this is, look, if you get really complicated tasks and you take the time to actually do them, that's not going to hurt your score. It's going to help your score. So please don't worry about that. So there's a few ways to register. I mean, that form, that link is pretty difficult to type out in your browser. So what I would recommend, I mean, you already found your way here. Somehow you're on this webinar. So there was some blog post or some tweet or some announcement that you went to. If you go to Radiant Earth's blog, if you search Medium Radiant Earth, you can find some recent blog posts, including the most recent one, which actually announces this competition with a link to the sign-up form. You can also go on Twitter and see Radiant Earth's tweets about this. So yeah, hopefully you can make your way to that sign-up form and find that pretty easily. But I will leave it up on the screen here for another beat. If you want to take a screenshot of it and sort of tediously manually type it in, you're more than welcome to do that. The way this is going to work is that everyone that's signed up will receive an email. You may have actually already received it. I'm not sure because I think we're kicking off at the top of the hour. And that will, if you don't have an account in Groundwork, that will say you've been invited to Groundwork and you've had some projects shared with you. There's the first 5 Sentinel scenes that we're going to be labeling, and then we're going to be adding more as we kind of get through all the tasks. If you don't have an account, it will prompt you to set a password. You'll be able to log in. You'll have an account. You'll be able to get started. If you do already have an account, it will just bring you to the project. You might have to re-log in if you have like an expired session or something like that. But look for that email. If you're just now signing up, every 2 minutes, we'll be checking that sign-up form and sending out those emails. So yeah, you'll be at a slight disadvantage over the course of a week. I don't know how many minutes that is, but you'll be a few minutes behind the people that have already signed up. But that should be plenty of time to catch up. So with that, we have a little under 30 minutes left to go through this tutorial and answer questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Nikki, who will actually show you what the application looks like. I need to stop sharing my screen if I can figure that out. And I'll be monitoring the chat where people can ask questions. And Nikki, I will give you, if we're running up against time, I'll jump in to give you kind of a 10-minute warning or a 5-minute warning. So don't worry about the time. And yeah, we'll get to the meat of it, which is how to actually get started labeling what it's going to look like for you.
Great. Sorry, I guess I've never allowed Zoom to share my screen before, so I guess I just have to give it permissions. I'm sorry.
No worries, Nikki. That happened to me too. That's why I dropped off at the start and relogged in. So you're probably going to have to restart Slack after you give it permissions, but
Okay.
don't worry about it. In the meantime, I'll answer people's questions.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so the first thing you're going to see is the Groundwork login screen. So you'll have whatever username you created. You'll type in whatever password you've created. And you'll hit login. The first screen that you see is going to show you all the projects that have been shared with you, which will be our stack projects that we're labeling for this competition, as well as one project called sample project, which I think is just standard on all accounts. So we're not actually going to use that one. The ones that we will be labeling for this competition are all labeled stack data sprint. I think you will initially be able to see 5 of those, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you get to one of those squares, or what we call a task, to start labeling? There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. So first, we can just filter to make sure we're only getting stack projects and leaving out that sample project. And then once we've done that, we can click this blue button right here that says Start Labeling. And it's going to take us to a random task and a random project that has not yet been labeled. So that is method number 1. So if we don't want to do that, you can always hit that X, by the way, to go back to the overview. Let's say I'm working with colleagues. We all want to work on the same project so that if we have questions, we can talk amongst ourselves. We can pick a specific project. So any of the ones that have been shared with you, you can click on the project. It'll take you to its home screen. And then once we're here, we have 2 different ways of getting to a task to label one of these squares. The first one is to just hit this label button, which is going to take us to a random unlabeled task in this specific project. Gonna let that load. Oh, look at that beautiful cloudy one. And then if we want to go back to that project screen, we can once again hit that X. Another way to get to a square, so maybe you all want to work on the same area of the map, so you can click on this task map itself. The squares are color-coded to let you know whether it's been labeled or not. So really, you guys are only going to see unlabeled, labeled, and maybe some flagged tasks. So you can click on any random unlabeled task, and it will ask you what you want to do. We're only going to label. So you click label, and once again, you are taken to a random unlabeled task. So that's how to get to something to label. So once you're in, you're ready to start labeling. What can you do once you're here? So first of all, we only have 2 label choices. We have clouds and background. So clouds mean any opaque cloud that you can see. And background is everything that is not an opaque cloud. So our goal is to exhaustively label each square, which some will be easy because you can see there are no opaque clouds in this one, versus we also saw one where it was all opaque clouds. But some you will have to specifically draw clouds out. So what can we do? Oh, sorry. So what if I see a task that is like wholly unsuitable to label? So sometimes we have ended up with tasks that are outside of the image boundary, or maybe the imagery is corrupted, or there's something else wrong with it, and really no one can label it. You can hit flag this task. And you could select a reason why. So in this case, obstructed by clouds is not a problem for us. But sometimes you can't see what's going on because of cloud shadow. That also probably won't be a problem for us because as long as it's not opaque clouds, we're going to call it background. But maybe there's something else wrong with it. The imagery is missing or corrupted in some way. You can go ahead and click that. Oh, I love children. Oh, I wish I could see that kid right now. Oh no. And then you can click flag this task, which I'm not going to do because once you click flag this task, it's going to remove it from the labeling queue so no one will ever come on that task. So I'm not going to do that here because this is a perfectly labelable task. I just made that word up, but I think it should exist, so I'm going to call it a good one. I'm going to hit cancel. So like Joe said, some of these tasks do look like they will take a long time. You're not going to be rewarded for skipping difficult tasks, but maybe, you know, you've logged in, you've only got like half an hour to label or 15 minutes to label, and you come across a task that is just too much. You don't have time to do it. You can always hit the skip button, which I will do. And it will take you to another unlabeled task within the same project that you've already chosen. Or if you didn't go to a specific project, I don't know, I guess it takes you to any random task that's unlabeled in any project. Sorry, my notes fell, so I'm gonna pick those back up. So once you have determined that, okay, I do have time to label this task, the imagery is good, how do you move around it? So you can zoom in and out using the plus and minus buttons right here. You can also use the scroll button on your mouse, which is what I'm doing, or the scroll button on your trackpad. I recommend using a mouse, but I have done it with just a trackpad before, so it can be done, but I definitely recommend using a mouse. To pan left and right, you need to either hold down Control or Command. I forget which one is Mac and which one is PC, but you hold it down and then you can use your mouse or trackpad again to zoom left and right, or I guess pan left and right or up and down. Then you'll also see this button right here, which is our layer picker. So we don't really need to deal with too many of these things, but some of them will be relevant to us. So you can control the opacity or remove any of the layers in a task using this layer picker. So if we have drawn labels, I'll just draw a cloud real fast. And let's say I want to look at the edges. Maybe I didn't do it perfectly. I just want to see if I got it right. I can go ahead and adjust the opacity so I can see underneath. I can remove them entirely if I feel even the outline is bothering me. Something you will see is that as people start labeling, you'll start to see in the adjacent tasks, you'll see their labels. That's something that you want to match what the people next to you did, provided they drew it well. I suppose if they just really didn't do it well, ignore it. But that's something you can control as well. Sometimes it helps you to see what the rest of the image looks like. So you can also control the task boundary. And again, you can remove it entirely. You can control the imagery itself. So if you take it away, I don't know why you would want to do it, but it is there. It works for other use cases, but for this one, I think we're only going to be using the first three in the layer picker. Okay, so once I've adjusted the imagery to my liking, how do I start drawing? So there are a couple of ways that you can draw. So first, you just want to make sure that you have the right category. So I want to draw clouds first. So I've got cloud highlighted. I can use the draw tool to draw. So I can do that in two ways. I can just do click and point. Basically, I'm just connecting the dots, and then Groundwork will fill in the rest. Or I can just click once and stay clicked down, and if I move my mouse or my trackpad around, I can kind of free draw. I'm surprised it was able to close that weird polygon. Personally, I do the dots, connect the dots, but I have seen people get very efficient at drawing the other way. Another tool that you can use to draw or to draw a polygon is the wand tool. So this is a new feature, so it may be buggy. If you find any problems with it or have any issues with it, please let us know. If you have any feedback, please let us know. But basically, it's like the magic wand tool in any kind of drawing app, where it kind of, you click on the area you want to draw, and it kind of figures out. So the further you get away from your initial point, the more it's going to fill in, versus the closer I get to where I first click down, the less it's going to fill in. So it's kind of a sensitivity is the word I'm looking for, if that makes sense. Or if you come upon a, I'm going to delete that. If you come upon a task like this, where it is all one thing, there's only going to be one label. This is all cloud cover. Once I hover up over that label, I can hit this paint bucket, which is just going to fill in the entire task with this label. So let's say, I'm going to delete this. Sorry. I did have a task. Oh, I'm on the wand. That had more than one label, and I wanted to adjust the label that I just drew. There are a couple of ways we can do that. First, I can right click on it and just either delete it, or as sometimes happens, you chose the wrong label, you forgot to switch back to background from cloud or the other way around. I can change the classification of it. I can also use the erase tool to erase the edges. So you have to be on the right category as the label. That's something important to remember to erase. And then I just draw what I want to erase, and it will take it out. I can use the replace tool to replace it with the other label. So I can choose the other label and just draw on top of it. Nope. Yeah, there we go. I don't know why that took so long to appear. And it'll replace it with the other label choice. So yeah, those are the ways of editing an image you just did. So once you're finished with the task, I'm gonna go ahead and delete all the labels that I drew here. Also, you can do Control-Z to also undo things. I don't think the redo works, but Control-Z does work to undo things. I'm gonna go ahead and label this tool using the paint bucket. And then once I'm finished with a task, I am satisfied that it's completely labeled, I hit confirm. And then I will be taken to another unlabeled task, and the task I just labeled will be put in the validate queue, which will be something that we'll worry about on our end. So you can see this one is a little bit more complicated, especially because you've got these semi-opaque clouds here that are going to take you some time to label. So I'll just, I guess, continue demonstrating on a task that has more labels so you can see what they look like together. So again, I am just too impatient to teach myself the other methods of drawing. And I have not used the wand tool enough to feel confident using it in front of you. So I'm just doing the click and point method, but again, whatever you feel most comfortable with, there's a whole bunch of different ways of drawing a polygon. So I've labeled this area as clouds. Now I want to get in, let's say I want to draw some background in. Maybe I'll try free draw. Yeah, and you can switch at any time. What else do I want to say? Some important things to note: if I draw two polygons of the same type right next to each other, they're going to merge. So you can take one cloud thing a little bit at a time. If I draw outside the boundaries of the task, it's going to ignore what I drew outside the boundaries. So that can also help you get very sharp edges. Also, if the task is all one thing, if you don't want to use the paint bucket tool, you can also just draw outside the task and it'll clip and it'll fill the whole task. So yeah, I think those are all the things that I wanted to cover. I'm going to delete all these labels and not confirm this task because I don't want to use up too many competition tasks. But yeah, now I'll pass it on to questions. Should I stop sharing my screen? Yes.
Yeah, there is one more resource that I want to share, which is the actual leaderboard. So I mentioned that we're going to be using this custom scoring metric, and we're going to be updating a leaderboard where you can see where you fall along with all other attendees. Let me just share my screen quickly. So if you go to groundwork.azavia.com/event, you'll be able to find this. There's a couple other useful things here besides just an infinite scrolling leaderboard. You can see right now everyone is tied for last place. So I'm sure that will change. You can see when it was last updated. It's not a real-time dashboard. It's sort of regularly updated on an increment. So don't worry if you submit a bunch of labels and then you don't see your score increase. Make sure that you check when it was last updated. A video is included in the description here. It basically goes over the same stuff that Nikki just talked about. So if you missed any of that or you have questions or you want a refresher, you can watch that training video. And obviously the sign up link and the original blog post announcing this with all the information that I covered at the beginning is there. So groundwork.azavia.com/event is going to be something to bookmark if you intend on winning or at least placing highly. So with that, let's answer some questions. I'm going to stop sharing. So question from Renee, does cloud shadow count as cloud or background? For the purposes of this competition, we're going to be labeling cloud shadow as background. So we're just specifically going to be labeling cloud and background. That's good. Good question. Another question here, how do I get a link to the task? Nikki showed at the beginning how to get into the labeling workflow. So you don't need to worry about getting linked to a particular task, but when you're logged in, if you filter to just the relevant projects, the stack projects, and you hit start labeling, it will bring you to a random task, and you'll, as you confirm, you'll just be brought from random task to random task. That's probably the most efficient way to do it. If you want, you can click into the a particular project. If there's some area geography that you're particularly excited about doing labeling on, you can click in there, select specific tasks. And then once you're in the labeling mode, it's just going to bring you again from random task to random task. Now, if there is a task and you have a question about it or you have any issues whatsoever, you want to return to it for some reason, there is a URL with a unique identifier for each task. So you can save that URL and use it to share an issue with the team, something like that. I would recommend using that flagging functionality that Nikki mentioned to share any issues. But if you noticed, you might have missed it, there's sort of a smiley face chat icon, the intercom chat icon in the bottom right hand of the screen. And if you run into any technical issues or have any sort of even philosophical questions about what is cloud and what is not, which you will undoubtedly have as you start doing this, you think it sounds simple to label clouds, and then you're met with edge case after edge case. So we're just asking you to use your best judgment, but if you want to double check, take a screenshot, drop us a note in that chat. We're going to be monitoring that. And obviously there's over 100 folks already signed up, probably more to come. So we might be a little bit slow to respond at first if we're getting a lot of questions out of the gate, but we are going to get to everybody that has questions. So yeah. Do you need to fully label a pixel, or can you label only areas you are confident with? Great question, Abraham. We are assuming that a confirmed task is exhaustively labeled. And so there may be sections where you're like, okay, this is a wispy cloud, or this is a solid cloud that fades to transparency. I don't know exactly where to place the line. or I'm not sure if this is a cloud or a really bright field or a patch of snow. Again, you can ask us for a second opinion, but we're just asking folks to use their best judgment. And if we get, I mean, the beauty of deep learning is if we get hundreds of people all making those decisions hundreds of times, the sort of collective judgment, the sort of consensus judgment of the labelers is going to be what gets encoded in the algorithms trained on this data. So yeah, please exhaustively label the tasks. And the way that I would recommend doing that, the technique I would recommend, you can label however you want, but basically label all of the cloud or label all of the background. Exhaustively label one class. It's easier for me to label clouds than it is to label background. So just exhaustively label the cloud. Paint bucket the other class, which will not overwrite the work that you've done. It will just fill in any unlabeled areas and then submit that. That's, I think, the most efficient way to do it. That requires the least amount of attention to detail to make sure you didn't miss any spots, anything like that. But yeah, great question, Abraham. So we've got 5 minutes left in our session, and okay, we got another question. If you do have a question, get it in now, because I want to hand it over to the other two presenters in this track, because they're going to be awesome presentations. I'm personally very much looking forward to both. And if we can give them a little extra time to go into some more depth or answer some more questions, we will. Okay, so one more question from Albert. Are you going to make a difference between clouds and smoke? Talking about smoke caused by fires such as those in the Amazon forest. Thanks. Great question. So we sampled randomly from, well, not exactly randomly, but we sampled from as disparate regions as we could. And if we do really well and we get through all of the 5 initial sentinel scenes, and maybe we get through another few rounds of 5 sentinel scenes at a time, we're up to 15 or 20 fully labeled scenes, we might actually consider bringing in slightly more complicated scenes, like sentinel scenes over California right now, which are going to be covered in smoke. I would say there's only 2 classes, cloud and background. So likely that would get counted as cloud, but it's an interesting edge case that you bring up. And unfortunately, with these machine learning projects, what you find is that no matter how basic the challenge is, no matter how simple you think it's going to be, someone asks a brilliant question like, is smoke cloud? Obviously not, but the question is a fair one. Okay, Ismail, looks like you're having some issues logging in. I think we're just going to wrap up here. Ismail, I'll respond to you privately and try to get you sorted. But thank you, everyone, for coming to this training. If you have more questions, if you're able to log in, which it sounds like, Ismail, you're having some issues, so I'll help you get logged in here. Once you're in there, use that chat to ask questions. You can also just contact us directly over email or Twitter, however you want to find us. But we really, really appreciate people taking the time to do this. And we're very excited to see the data that gets generated because of this effort. So thanks again to the sponsors who are making this possible. And with that, I am going to hand it back to Hamed, I believe, to set up the next presentation.
Thank you, Joe and Nikki. Great presentation and discussion on the contest. So let's move to Dave. We have a couple of minutes. I'm thinking it might be better actually to start at the right time, because people might switch between the tracks. So we don't want to go ahead of the schedule, actually. So if there's another question you want to answer for a minute or two, you can do. And then Dave, you can start sharing your screen now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
1,000th time this year.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm excited.
Everyone.
I didn't realize that you were presenting right after me. I don't even have to leave the Zoom, because this is the presentation I would have gone to. So yeah.
It's a lot to meet up to. Your presentation was awesome. I'm excited to look at some clouds for sure. So I will definitely get on that.
we'll see how you feel after the 10th task or the 100th task. I don't know if you're excited with the clouds anymore, but I certainly find the scoring motivating. When can we start labeling? We're almost up on time, but let me just confirm with the engineers to make sure that the invitations have gone out. And if they have, then you can begin right now. If you can see the projects, you're allowed to start labeling.
Joe, I can comment on that. I think we just about created all the users. There's an issue with sending out some of the emails. So everybody should have an account. They might need to go through the password reset process on the Groundwork login page. And that's how they can get started.
Thanks, Chris.
Great.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad to see that you're logged in. Hopefully you see the stack projects. But like Chris said, there's hundreds of these invitations that have to go out, and there's probably some API throttling that we're going to run into at some point or another. So if you don't see anything, hang in there, and we'll get you all sorted here in the next couple of minutes. But with that, I think we're at time, so I'm going to hand it over to Dave. And thanks again, y'all.